All right, boys, it's game day. Let's go. Let's go. Big game. Got a big game today. My package has arrived. Oh, sweet. Nice. Score! Great win, fellas. What game's next? G-Men are having a great year. Let's go blue. Here we go. Prime time football. Texans, Dolphins. Let's do this. Yes! Review. Yes! Yes!
Heartland Flags. Every sport, every team, every flag.
Every team?
That's right.
Fine. I'll get a Washington flag too.
Find your flag and so much more with fast, free shipping. Heartlandflags.com. Every sport, every team, every flag. Almost.
Loyals.
Heartland Flags and Gifts presents Legends and Listeners with Scott Dochterman and Chad Liestikow. Fly 'em high and fly 'em proud. Find your flag at heartlandflags.com. Breaking down the Big Ten from the Channel Seed Studios, this is Iowa Everywhere.
Hey, Hawkeye fans, Big Ten fans, and Iowas everywhere. I had no idea if I was going to be on the air or not. I was scrambling here. My microphone came unplugged. I couldn't hear anything for a while, but here we are. Chad Liestikow here of the Des Moines Register, along with Scott Dochterman of The Athletic. Good to be back in the state of Iowa and in the hometown of Caitlin Clark, who everyone wants to talk about. Even Ron DeSantis, who was just out in the newsroom here talking about whatever with our Brienne fan and Steel. Welcome into the Channel Seed Studios. This is episode 21 of Legends and Listeners here on the Iowa Everywhere Network. Scott, obviously a super eventful day here in central Iowa. First, my heart aches for the Perry community after a shooting at the high school this morning. I happen to know a couple teachers there. It's just, my mind's not in the right spot today. So this is the kind of stuff that sort of puts our lives and what we do for a living into its proper perspective. Talk about sports, talk about how bad offenses are, all that stuff. But I don't know. I hate to throw that on you right away, but that's kind of where my heart is as we start this show.
Yeah, I mean, this is when we don't say anything's a tragedy or travesty when we're talking about what happens on the field or the court. When you're looking at what happened in Perry this morning, I mean, part of me kind of wondered, should we push this off a little bit? Either a couple hours or a day, but overall, yeah, I mean, this certainly is in a time where we could say, our thoughts, prayers, and are directed towards the people of Perry, and it's not just a throwaway statement. It's true. I mean, this has been heart-wrenching to watch from on the other side of the state in my case.
Yeah. I live in Adel, so not too far from Perry. And when I was taking my kids to school, I saw police cars screaming that we had to pull over because there's a highway we got to go for my daughter's school, and screaming that direction towards where my son goes to school. So of course you don't usually see that kind of pace from a police car for like a heart attack or, a fire or something like that even. There was like 5 or 6, by the time I made it all the way down that road. So luckily both my kids were with me at that time, but I just didn't know what was going on. And so mine's been racing all morning, and don't know all the details yet, but I know our folks at the Register here just outside these walls are working on it and have some stuff up, and we can talk about sports now if that sounds good.
Yeah, I think so. At this point, everybody knows where we are, and if anything happens while we're going live, we'll certainly update you.
All right, Scott, before we get into football talk, which of course there is plenty of it, continue to come to the realization that this is Caitlin Clark's world and we're just living in it right now. Today is January 4th. The Final Four starts in Cleveland on April 4th. Iowa may not get there. This team has some flaws for sure, but it just puts into frame for me that it's very possible that Caitlin Clark's Iowa career only has 3 months at most left in it. Well, not at most, but like possibly at most this year. And I just keep just appreciating every moment that I get to watch her, and I know a lot of people are feeling the same right now. How do you kind of capture just everything she's doing from the last second shot the other day to kind of this time ticking away potentially in her career in Iowa?
She has a flair of making the spectacular look routine. And that's for a shot the other day. Is anybody surprised she hit a three-pointer at the beak at the buzzer to win? No, because she does those types of plays happen with regularity with her. I think the right approach now is, okay, if she comes back, she comes back. My expectation is she probably won't. And I think for the next 2.5, 3 months, whatever, how much time we're blessed to appreciate everything that she has here. And that is soak it up. Watch it. There's going to be games where she's going to struggle. There's going to be games where she's going to miss shots. But to appreciate a once-in-a-lifetime type of athlete at Iowa, and to top it off, the representative that she is and the transcendent figure that she has become, we're living in a rare era, Chad. And I think it's almost I think we have to appreciate her for what she's been able to do, because people will talk about Caitlin Clark for generations, the way our families may have talked about Ronnie Lester, but she has done it tenfold from what Ronnie Lester did. The way punters and football coaches talk about Reggie Roby. She is the most transcendent figure in sports today. And I would say, we could talk about Niall Kinnick's legacy all we want, but she is on at minimum a Mount Rushmore of 2 right now in Iowa sports history.
Actually, I want to follow up with you on that, because it's just a discussion I've had in my text group this morning too, because I called her the greatest Hawkeye in any sport ever, like in a text this week. And, that not much pushback, but there is a conversation certainly about Niall Kinnick. But I want to get your opinion on that in a second. But just you mentioned she's going to have off games, but I mean, she hardly ever does. Like even the other night, things were not going good. I think she had maybe even a scoreless third quarter or end of the third quarter. I can't remember. She had 19 for the longest time. And she just all of a sudden just turned it on, and there she was, just draining threes, top of the key. It's just, if you just look at her points every game, I mean, it's just massively consistent. Even the great men's players, they'll have a 8 or 10 point night. It's just not their night. She just doesn't. To me, she doesn't ever have an off night. I know shooting wise maybe, but just with the domination of the game for her, and it's just unbelievable what she can do on a night in, night out basis. And that's why whenever she does pass Kelsey Plum for the scoring record, right now the projection is February 15th against Michigan, but who knows? She's just scoring at such an elite pace right now. It's just, she deserves it. She deserves to be number one, because she is just so consistently dominant, and she has been, and she's actually just ascending. I mean, she's getting even better. And I remember doing a story on her when she was a sophomore, and it's just some people were like, yeah, this is elite stuff. She's probably not going to get much better, but this is maintaining it. She's gotten way better from 2 years ago. So it's just remarkable to watch.
Yeah, it's not unlike, and this is rare air, both figuratively and literally, to Michael Jordan in his early career with the Bulls, to where he ended up in championship form. When he came on first, he was scoring at will. I remember the playoff series against Boston, where he went 49 points, and then 63 points, and then later on, and a couple of years later, he was a better all-around player than he was then. He still had those big shooting nights, but he could do so much more. And I think Caitlin Clark's career is kind of paralleled that to some extent, where she was a pure scorer. But, you did a really good job of documenting her workouts in the off season back in late spring, early summer. And And, she's bigger. She's more physical. She still looks so thin that people think that she's, a twig or something. But, I remember somebody calling her Anne Hathaway out there on the floor. I thought that was kind of funny. But, either way, her game is going to another level. Now, the Kansas State game that they lost, she did not play well. She missed a ton of shots. But even more so, that's where her teammates have to help her out. And they did not help her out that day. I mean, the guards weren't scoring and what have you. So she's going to need a couple of those games, but by and large to go out there. And then you talk about the transcendent force that she is. I mean, like this week they're going to Rutgers. It's sold out. It was sold out before it became C. Vivian Stringer night. Northwestern has been sold out. And I remember going to that game in Chicago at Wrigley, and they're like, get your women's basketball tickets here. And it includes an Iowa ticket. And, and Minnesota, I believe, is sold out. And UNI and Iowa State, all these venues to see the Caitlin Clark experience. And as you said in the opening, Chad, it's Caitlin Clark's world. We're all living in it.
So just to finalize this discussion here, that is Caitlin Clark the greatest Hawkeye of all time? I think for sure. But I'm trying to transport myself back to 1939 because we weren't here to see Niall Kinnick. But, something Phil Parker said actually about Cooper DeJean the other day, I feel like gives me enough of a perspective to say that she is the best, because we didn't get to see him. But I try to imagine, if we had seen Niall Kinnick in 1939, let's say Cooper DeJean was in 1939 for just for comparison. We had seen him have that Heisman Trophy season, and obviously he went on to he was more than just a football player, obviously. But Caitlin Clark, to me, has done this for 4 years on a high visibility national stage. I mean, State Farm commercials, Manning Cast, Final Four. It's not like the 1939 Hawkeyes won the national championship. And I know Iowa didn't either, but just at every measure you look at, to me, Clark is number one. And I personally don't think I think she's clear number one, but you said kind of 1, 2. So I'd respect your opinion on this too.
I threw it out there that I thought she was number one during the Final Four, and kind of had a lot of pushback on that. And, there's a couple of things she has to overcome before we can completely crown her universally. And that is, the legacy and the legendary status and the lofty status that we have for Niall Kinnick. That's something you just can't take away, even in a 3 to 4 year period. That's going to have to come in time. And I think with, Niall Kinnick won the Heisman that year. That's impactful. They won a lot of close games, and he's also named the AP Male Athlete of the Year when you had some terrific, and that was across the board for when Major League Baseball and boxing and some other sports were at a high level. So the other part is, and how he conducted himself off the field. Student body president, died tragically in war during a training exercise. The stadium's named after him. That is really hard for anybody to overcome. However, I think athletically, your theory holds water. She is the greatest athlete to compete in Iowa. I think we want to talk about, we're blessed. The fans should feel blessed that when you're talking about the biggest 4 sports at Iowa, removing football from the equation, we've seen maybe the 3 best players at their sports over the last handful of years. Spencer Lee is a wrestler. I think he was probably the best wrestler. I think we look at Luka Garza. Statistically, it's proven to be the case. Although Keegan Murray may be the most athletic of the bunch, and Caitlin Clark. And you throw Megan Gustafson in there as well, because she was tremendous. But, I think Gustafson and Garza and Lee are on a Mount Rushmore. And Caitlin is the face over, it's not even the George Washington. She's the sun overlooking the Mount Rushmore. It's just a remarkable career, and how she conducts herself off the floor, Chad, and how she has brought that sport to the forefront, ratings wise, attendance on the road, 13 out of the 14 Big Ten schools acknowledge her as a Caitlin Clark effect. There's one school in the Big Ten that doesn't. And then overall, I think this is just the ultimate Iowan. She's an Iowa girl, and she's never let that perish. It's always about that. So, maybe at the end of the year, I'll get there and agree with you on it. And I'm very, very close to doing so now.
Really, really good perspective there. Thank you, Scott. I have not been blocked by Dawn Staley yet. Have you?
I didn't tweet Dawn Staley. I was asleep.
I didn't either. So, yeah, I can still see your tweets, but who knows? Maybe I'll be blocked by the end of the show. Anyway, thanks as always to our sponsor, Heartland Flags and Gifts, which offers free shipping anywhere in the U.S. It always has fresh products, nearly every sport, every team, every flag. And that I didn't even realize this. That includes some high schools in our area, too. So you can get a Dowling flag if you're a huge Caitlin Clark and Dowling fan. Go get a Dowling flag at Heartland Flags and Gifts. You can get Waukee Northwest. You can get Van Meter, Gilbert. They have it all. Visit our good friends online, heartlandflags.com, or in store, Southwest 3719 Southwest 9th Street in Des Moines. All right, Scott, let's do the football stuff here. Are you ready?
Yeah, let's go.
All right. It was funny. I actually did rewatch the Citrus Bowl. I can't believe I did it, but I did. And I almost have I'm almost more fired up now about I just can't believe how bad the offense was this year. But let's just we're going to talk mostly today about looking forward, Scott. But just let's give each other one, I guess, I don't know, cathartic whatever to put to rest the Citrus Bowl. What stood out to you rewatching that 35-0 loss to Tennessee?
I hate to go here, Chad, because I really we try, I think, really hard to acknowledge that they're college athletes and not professional athletes. But the quarterback play, the last two games is from that position up through the fourth quarter was as abysmal as I've ever seen in my life. And as much as we can blame Deacon Hill for it, you got to blame the coaches. They put him in that position. They kept him in that position. Even when the whole world saw that it wasn't working, they kept him there. I mean, I don't know if it was a winnable game or not. I mean, I think with a competent offense, I think they're competitive. But when you're talking about the last two games, and in particular, let's just go with this one. You had an interception in the end zone into double coverage when the opportunity was there to run, and you had all day in the pocket. You're inside the 5. You cannot blow those opportunities. Then there's the strip sack, and I was sitting next to Tom Kakert, and he goes, "This feels like a Deacon strip sack." And lo and behold, the very next play, he got strip sacked, and then he backs it up with a pick six. How do you put yourself in a position to compete when Iowa would have been better off the last two games going out and taking 3 knees and punting rather than putting their offense out there. It's a disgrace to the sport and to their players. I'm sorry. I don't really want to bag on it too much, because if this was the Chicago Bears, I'd be going all in depth. But, they were shut out in 2 consecutive games against their, 2 of their 3 best opponents. And, forget having, a puncher's chance. They had nothing. And I think this was on the coaches more than the players, because everybody saw it and they still continued to say, the offensive coordinator said he's played good football and we're sticking with him for 4 quarters. And it was obvious that he didn't deserve it.
So my good analysis there, Scott. I was gonna go into just rolling my eyes at just how they went about everything, started in 13 personnel, all that stuff. But what I wrote after the game was maybe Iowa should have done what Tennessee did. Start bowl prep with the true freshman quarterback at number 1. You saw it was not working with Deacon Hill, and just given Marco Linez 3 weeks, 3.5 weeks to get ready for this game. Maybe they obviously didn't do that. We know they didn't do that. They didn't really think about doing that. I kind of wish I would have said they've been even stronger in my column as I look back on it now, but said maybe they should have done that in hindsight. That's what I don't get. This whole time you've had, and I'm not saying Marco. I know Marco was not the greatest passer in practice, and I'm sure that held him back in terms of what the coaches thought he could do with upside at the quarterback position. But I just can't help but thinking, just seeing the glimpses of mobility that we saw from him, could an innovative offensive coordinator have taken that during the bye week, perhaps, especially after Minnesota, which was a disaster at the quarterback position, and turn that into a different type of offense and folded in Cooper DeJean, which we did see a little bit of. So give Iowa a tiny bit of credit there. You can't tell me, Scott, that Iowa, or even just the package of plays in the Citrus Bowl, which I asked Brian Ferentz about, like, to not have like a mobile quarterback in a red zone package or like some kind of like third down, like 3rd and 2 kind of situation, to not even like go there or think about it and just say, well, we're just going to drop back and whatever. And we're going to go shotgun and 13 personnel or whatever stupid stuff they do and rely on Deacon to make a completion when you got a quarterback in the wings that can at least run for that first down, which you saw him do 4 times on his very first college drive. Anyway, that just gives me nail in the coffin, final confirmation that they did not have the right person in the quarterback's coach and offensive coordinator room the last few years. And I'm looking forward to the change, whoever it is.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I think we both have tried to give them the benefit of the doubt at different times and different junctures, even if we're yawning or, exhaling, going, okay, I guess, fine, we'll see what it does. But, the quarterback play has got substantially worse the last 2 years. I think, Spencer Petras regressed. The people underneath him, Joe Labus, Alex Padilla, Deacon Hill, where have they made any strides whatsoever? Whether it's Brian Ferentz, whether it's John Budmeyer, there's been no improvement whatsoever. I mean, and it wasn't like Cade was lighting the world on fire either before he got hurt, but I understand he had a right quad issue, but it wasn't, even the passing wasn't that crisp, and he still had Eric All at that point. I think right now, in order to go forward as a program, you have to have this move. And I wasn't a real big fan of the drive for 325 because I think it made Iowa a punchline, and it did until Brian was dismissed. But this had to happen. And Chad, Kirk has a million positives and qualities as a head coach and as a person, and he's a Hall of Fame coach in my eyes. He's done so many great things. But his loyalty, which is a strength, is also a weakness. And then you throw the family element into it. It's allowed him to continue to elevate and push for, a person that didn't deserve that job anymore. Maybe he did. I'll say that he deserved a crack at it. But I think the last couple of years has shown that you just can't do this in major college football. And you're doing this to your fan base. And when we're seeing these games, I mean, they had only one game. Did they have more than one touchdown in since Purdue? The last, 8 games? And that was Rutgers. They had 2. I mean, this is a disaster. And so it needed to end. And, and then the obtuse philosophy, or just shrug your shoulders and we know better than you. Well, we have eyes. I'm not saying I know how to call plays better than you, but we know what doesn't work, and it's whatever they've tried to trot out there the last 2 to 3 years.
Yeah, as on our post-game podcast, Dargan Southern made a comment of Marshall Meter ends up scoring the final points of the Iowa season in 2023, and I was like, oh my God. That feels like forever ago.
Yeah.
That's how they could not score another. The other regret I have from that game, and I know it was 28-0. I wish they would have kicked the field goal with Drew Stevens deep into Terry. They weren't going to win. Give Marco Linez a scoring drive. Give Drew Stevens a chance to kind of, lift up his, spirits after that rough Nebraska game. It looked like he was great in warmups. Would have liked to, would have seen. It's a minor thing, I know, but you could have given Marco Linez a scoring drive. You could have given Drew Stevens a chance to kick that field goal, take the 0 off the board. Maybe people would have laughed at it, whatever. But, it wasn't like a 4th and 2 or anything. I can't remember what it was. It was like 4th and 7 or something, but I don't know. Anyway, very minor thing.
Yeah, and the unfortunate part is, Chad, that they didn't give their defense a chance again. If you go to the first, it was the second drive for Iowa, but scoring opportunity. Had they punched it in there, I mean, Tennessee has a really good, vibrant young quarterback, and who's making his first start. And had he still scored those 2 touchdowns that they did in the first half, okay, you go to halftime down 14-7, but then you start to look at the second half and the way it materialized for Iowa. Again, a pick 6, a fumble on your own 2-yard line. You just gave them 14 points. What did your defense do to deserve it? I mean, Joe Evans sets the school record for most sacks in a bowl game with 4, and it's barely a footnote. Jay Higgins ties the school record for most tackles in a season that's been around for 51 years. And it's kind of a footnote. And, even Nick Jackson finished with more than 100 tackles and all this stuff. And yet it comes down to the way the offense performed. And of course, Torrey Taylor's unreal season had a tremendous ending for him. But I think he would get rid of that record if they would have had a better offense, because even going into the season, he was like, I'm hoping to punt a little bit less. But, unfortunately for him, he punted a lot more. So I think right now you feel bad for the defensive coaches that had to deal with this, because they had a defense that was capable of competing at the highest level. I'm not saying that they're better this year than they were last year, but I'm saying that you march that defense out with a competent offense, and they go toe-to-toe with Michigan in the Big Ten championship game. But instead, you have 2 strip sacks, and then a long punt return, and it's sayonara.
Well, Happy New Year to everybody out there, and cheers to 2024 from our friends at Steeple Ridge Bourbon. Steeple Ridge delivers a high-quality, delicious drinking bourbon. If you don't find Steeple Ridge at your favorite grocer or retailer, ask for it by name. Steeple Ridge is distilled, aged, and bottled in Iowa by Lonely Oak Distillery. I got a couple different directions I could go here, Scott, but let's just stick with – I want to reflect on 2023 season a little bit, but since we're kind of on the quarterback offense topic, let's just kind of finish it up here with kind of a little bit of news, I guess, that Oregon transfer Ty Thompson is going to visit the Iowa campus on Friday, first reported by 247 Sports. Nice job on that, David. Notable that Iowa is still looking at the quarterback position. I think that is a refreshing thing. Here's the backup to Bo Nix at Oregon, 5-star prospect, and you've at least got him interested in coming to campus this week. So to me, that's reassurance that whoever the next OC is not going to have a completely, it's not going to be watching maybe not going to be watching Deacon Hill and Marco Linez throw passes this spring. Totally, exclusively, I mean.
Exclusively, yeah. I think it's great. I think it's something that we've talked about before, that when you look at this, offense, if Cade McNamara is truly going to be your automatic number 1 starter for next year, he's not going to be there in the spring to be able to do that. He might be able to do certain drills, but his knee, he's still recovering from an ACL. So do you want to really look at Deacon Hill and Marco? I would give him every opportunity to improve, and maybe they did. And maybe he, again, it wasn't, he was certainly qualified from a running standpoint. Passing was a little bit different element the other day, but what if Cade is, too far gone? What if he ends up, he's had an ACL? I mean, it was in September. What if it doesn't respond until September? Is he going to be able to just walk in and be a great passer? I mean, he wasn't lighting the world on fire to begin with. And then you want to put yourself in this position with the two national championship teams plus Oregon and, and all these other teams in the league. I mean, I think it's the right move. And if Ty Thompson comes in and he comes in the spring and he's the best player there, and then by training camp, Cade's healthy and he's still the best player, then play the best player. You don't owe anybody anything. You don't owe anybody anything at the offensive line or secondary or certainly wide receiver. So why would you do that at quarterback for a guy who's only played in a handful of games for you? So I like this a lot because you're trying to get better and you're telling your players we're still trying to get better. We're not complacent on offense just with what we have.
Definitely. And I realize maybe stuff trickles out at a different rate, but we haven't seen really any major Hawkeyes enter the portal, which closed on the 2nd. So Liam Reardon, the long snapper, is in there. That was the big news this morning, right? The backup long snapper is in there. But I don't know. Yeah, I think that's it. Like you said, my point being, you're sending a message to your offense too. Like, hey, we're raising the bar here. Not saying Ty Thompson's going to be coming here, but it's encouraging that he's here and they got him on campus and they're pursuing that. Because I agree. I mean, you look at, no offense, but Cade McNamara's stats, and I realize it was in a beleaguered offense, but his stats, let's read them off. 46 for 90, 4 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, 51% completion percentage, 101 yards per game. I realize the Michigan State game truncates that a little bit, but he was there. Eric All was there. Cooper DeJean was there up in Happy Valley. You didn't have Luke Lachey, but you had everybody else, and you gained 50 yards, and I think Deacon Hill maybe gained the other 20-some. So it was not a good day for Cade up there, and tough year for the Hawkeyes. They ended up with 216 points, needed 350 for that 25 points per game mark.
Yeah.
The number to me, Scott, that really stands out is -7 in turnover margin this year, 114th in the country. So I think that's got to be a priority too. Something that Kirk Ferentz can't keep leaning on. Now we just need someone to protect the football. His guys didn't protect the football this year.
And that's the irony, because I think really with Deacon Hill, the whole thought was, well, at least he could protect the football, and he never did. And you kept playing a guy who was worse at protecting the football than anybody else you've ever had. And so what was the upside? What's the upside with Marco Lainez? It was that he could do something offensively, and the downside isn't anything because, okay, so he gets 2 turnovers a game. So did your quarterback, Now I do think on the other side that I think that with the defense didn't force as many turnovers, and that's something that they've got to investigate too. I don't think that's anything too glaring necessarily, but it is something that's noticeable and impactful. But I wrote today about kind of wrapping up the 2023 season with 10 different topics or whatever. And among those was stat of the year. And I'm like, in the olden days, 10 wins would have been the stat of the year. What a great way to complete your season. But frankly, 15.4, the average points per game. They couldn't even make it to 225, let alone the drive for 325. And, that's what, second worst in the country. That's just, that dwarfs it. And I do argue with people who say, well, that's only because they played that easy schedule. Yes, they played in a down division, no question. However, somebody has to win those games. And then you continue to look at the defense, which was a national best yards per play allowed, and played the 4th most plays in the country on defense. It's just extraordinary what they were able to do, despite having, this albatross that's been chained to them for now a couple of years.
Sometimes you say things that just make me laugh. Albatross. I think part of the turnover problem was that opposing offenses knew they didn't have to take risks against this Iowa defense. So it was on the offense to me, because you saw that even from Tennessee. Heck, Josh Heupel was punting on 4th and 1. I don't think he would have done that if Iowa had any offense. So I think that's part of the problem. You need an offense that's going to challenge teams so that your defense can be in a position to force those turnovers and, heck, turn some games into routes. Wouldn't that be something crazy? Well, let's one more thought here on the season, Scott. How will you remember the 2023 Hawkeyes? What is kind of the legacy of this team? They had a chance to become the fourth 11-win team of the Ferentz era. Certainly is not in the class of those previous three, 02, 09, 15. Doesn't get to be in that class for sure. But how will this team be remembered now that it's in the books?
You know, juxtaposed against one another, the offense and defense, I think it's really, I think most people are going to remember it for the offensive woes, which is probably a little unfortunate. But on the flip side, I'm going to look at it on the bright side, which is that defense was outstanding. They had high character players who just kept grinding, kept fighting. And, from Joe Evans, 28 sacks from a former walk-on in his career. What an astounding stat. Jay Higgins, 171 tackles this year, replacing somebody I thought that was irreplaceable. Cooper DeJean, had the two most exciting plays of the year. One counted and one has a giant asterisk. And then Illinois, the end of the Illinois game, Caleb Johnson's run to win, be the last team to clinch a championship on its home field in the West Division and one of two ever in the Big Ten, because, from here on out, you don't get a trophy. You just go to Indianapolis. There's no division title anymore. So, it persevered despite all these negatives and still won 10 games, still won a division title, still won 3 out of the 4 traveling trophies, and we can all make the case for the 4th. So it's just, to me, but you've got it. You almost have to see it with both eyes, and in both ways. How about you? What do you think?
Well, certainly, I mean, as a journalist, I'm going to remember the sports gambling part of this big time. Yeah. Just how that kind of just began this whole season with such a weird element, just unusual, just the strangest season, even more so than 2020. I feel like, for me, I mean, it was right there with 2020, probably, with COVID and racial bias all lumped into one. But man, this was just the weirdest season, man. Just Cade, injuries, more injuries. The invalid fair catch was probably the craziest week of my life. Mm-hmm. Maybe not the craziest, but just the most, God, what kind of season is this? Where I'm all of a sudden on a conference call with, Bill Carollo and talking about, aerial views of Cooper DeJean waving his arm and, just craziness. But I guess to kind of bring it full circle, something Kirk Ferentz said in the postgame, hey, remember we won 10 games and won the Big Ten West. Well, I don't think I'm going to remember that for this. I feel like I'm going to remember that they won 10 in spite of how bad their offense was. And I just hope that Kirk, when he's making this OC hire, and I think he probably is, but I don't know that he is, understands that you can't win 10 games like this. That's not what your offense did, is not a formula for a 10-game season ever again. I don't see how it's even possible. And you look back at even 2021, yeah, they won 10 games, but they were a pretty functional offense through that Penn State game. And then it just went down a crater of a hill, starting the next week against Purdue, and it's never recovered. So you basically went 3-4 with that offense that year, kind of at this level. So anyway, I guess that brings it full circle. When do you expect an offensive coordinator hire to be made, I guess, at this point?
Well, Kirk said, he hoped that it'll be by week 3 of this month. I think that's fair. I don't know if he's considering or looking at any NFL current OCs or assistants or whatever, because that season ends on Sunday. Who knows? There could be somebody out there that he's looking at, or even in the national title game. Maybe Ryan Grubb wants to come home, something like that. But I would expect it to kind of get to, a really complete era. Probably next week is when things will start to really heat up, and then we could have I wouldn't be surprised if in another week from now we get a hire and maybe a press conference the following week about it. And this is really going to kind of the last couple of holes of the Kirk Ferentz coaching career here. You're on hole 17 and 18, and it can be 5 more years for all we know, but it really is impactful because we were both, either in college or working at newspapers or institutions of the state at the end of the Hayden Fry era. And outside of, 96 was kind of a better than expected season. 97 was very disappointing. But really for that run, ever since the 10-1 season in 91, it was not really a good reign for the last several years there. And, with the expanded Big Ten, better teams coming in, and, it's got the potential to get to that level where you're fighting for bowl eligibility. And that's just not the way you want to finish up. I think he's been able to kind of pull himself together so many times. You got to admire that, but he's got to have one more in him. And he's going to have to make sure that the offensive coordinator has some autonomy. And that's why, he keeps telling us, hey, they need to work well with other people and be a good teammate and all that type of thing. But once you bring him in here, don't micromanage him. Let him do his job, because it's obvious that the family element didn't do that job.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that. I feel like the one thing I hope that Kirk Ferentz does, just for everybody who listens to this show, they want Iowa to be good on offense. I just hope that he is willing to take a little bit of a step out on the ledge and not try to be too safe with either higher end approach or both. Just a little bit. I don't feel like at this point in his career there's any downside to taking just a little bit of a leap of faith outside of your own comfort zone to try something different. That's what I think the message would be after watching these last 2.5 seasons of offense, the way you like to run offense. Mm-hmm. So anyway, all right. You mentioned Ryan Grubb. Let's talk. It is a Big Ten show, right? Legends and listeners. So let's talk about the national title game, the All Big Ten final, Scott.
Yeah.
Michigan, Washington. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, this is what, back in the day when the SEC would have a team in the championship and win it, everybody, down south, it's like, yeah, doesn't matter. We were 3-6 in the bowls, but this is the only one that matters. Well, here we are. The Big Ten had a pretty disappointing bowls campaign, I think, but now you got 2 teams in there, in the Michigan Wolverines, the team that everybody hates to hate, and then you got Washington, which, it's really interesting. Michael Penix, the one game we saw in recent memory, was not good at all. However, he's been much better every other game since then. So I think this has the ability to be a classic, terrific game, 2 contrasts in styles. But Michigan proved to me the other day that it's got the horses to compete against really talented teams. And so I think the Wolverines might win this one.
Yeah, the Michigan's ability to just own the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball, even without Zinter, who I know obviously is out for the year, but it's just really impressive. They're just so methodical in everything they do, and they just suck the life out of you. We saw that ourselves at the Big Ten title game. We saw that last year in Iowa City as well. J.J. McCarthy, I don't think he has needed to be as good as he probably is just because of Michigan's system and the way Harbaugh runs things. So to me, I feel like Michigan is a deserved favorite. I know it's a 4.5-point spread, but man, I love watching Washington. I'm probably in my heart of hearts rooting for Washington just because I like watching them. Both of their coordinators have Iowa ties in Ryan Grubb and Billy Ennis-Inge, William Inge now.
Yeah.
I'll always know him as Billy Ennis-Inge. I just think I like rooting for Michael Penix. He's a little bit of an underdog story. I like their coach, Caleb DeBoer. And man, their receivers are so good. I hope Adunze is a Bear next year. I hope the Bears take him at number 8 overall, something like that. Take him along with whoever else up high.
Marvin Harrison.
Yeah, take them both.
And DJ Moore. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Now we're rolling.
I just love watching Washington, but Michigan's defense, I think, is going to give them a lot of problems because they've got the ability to pressure up front, and we saw how hard it was for Iowa to throw the ball. Not that says anything. But it's hard to throw against this Michigan team. So it's kind of that contrast of styles we thought we were getting, I guess, in the Citrus Bowl, maybe a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard for Iowa to throw 7-on-7 most of the time, but I do think the ties are really interesting. Kalen DeBoer played at Sioux Falls. Two of his teammates are two of my very best friends I graduated high school with. One was my college roommate. Another one lives in Minneapolis, and we were both quarterbacks on the same high school team. So he was Kalen's backup there. So it's there's some ties there. And Ryan Grubb was a teammate at Buena Vista with another one of my high school teammates and friends. So there's a lot of ties to this state and to this region for them. So I'm interested in kind of the Big Ten thought process around here. Usually a Big Ten team, even Ohio State, when they've made it, most Big Ten fans put down their angst and said, okay, I'll root for the league. That doesn't seem to be the case as much here with Michigan. It's not the case in Columbus as always, or East Lansing, or Happy Valley, or Iowa City, I would say, is probably the same way. I mean, the cheating scandal is really intensified the disdain for Harbaugh, for Michigan, and the fact that Washington's coming into the league. I think it kind of softens that up. That it's like, well, they're going to be a Big Ten team too. So, and then we can all shed some crocodile tears for the SEC that they would have had two in there, and they hot damn, they're not there. So so we got to hear about that, right?
Yeah, exactly. I think if you're a Hawkeye fan or a fan that usually roots for the Big Ten, and I know most people that I know are, NCAA tournament comes along, they'll root for that Big Ten all the way. But now you can root against Michigan, and you can root for the Big Ten in a way at the same time. And plus, Washington is just such a likable team. I mean, they're just fun to watch. They're fun to watch, and the crazy thing is they've won. They're like Iowa in a lot of ways. They've won 9 straight games by, 10 points or less? I think 9 points. So they're kind of a high wire act. They don't like blow teams out necessarily. And so they make it interesting. They got those character guys. So they're kind of like Iowa with a much better offense with Iowans kind of running the show. So I think I'm going to pick Michigan, but I'm rooting for a classic, like you said.
Yeah. And, I think I was surprised. I thought Michigan would end up losing for some reason against Alabama. And so when they got down a couple of times, I thought, all right, this is when the SEC speed and talent kind of come to wipe away the Big Ten. And instead, they fought hard. And Blake Corum was as good as any player on the field. And I thought that was impressive. And JJ McCarthy competed. And then their defense, the line of scrimmage, was able to really own it. So, it's interesting that it bookends the 10-year 14 playoff era with Ohio State winning it against Alabama in the semifinals, and then Michigan beating Alabama in the semifinals, and not a whole lot of success in the middle. But I do think this was, if it's Michigan, then it's a true Big Ten victory. If it's Washington, then, well, that's what we got to look forward to next year. The interesting thing is Michigan's schedule. They play Texas next year. They play Washington, Oregon, Ohio State, of course, Michigan State, USC. So Michigan's got quite the schedule. And then you throw on, will Harbaugh be there? I don't know. I don't think he will be, but that's just me.
Yeah, I kind of think this is it for him one way or another. But, yeah, great conversation. Had fun with you in Orlando, Scott, and had fun with you talking today, and maybe we'll have an OC in place next time we talk on Iowa Everywhere here.
That would be great. Anytime we can, shave off these big topics. Iowa did return, as returning several players. Yesterday was Jamari Harris, and last week Luke Lachey and Jay Higgins, and maybe we'll get one or two more this week, and then by next week we can finish that off, and maybe the OC, and maybe we can look at our calendars and say, you know what, maybe we could take a day or two off. That would be something nice, and put away the phone and the computer and move ahead. But we know that that's usually not the case.
All right. Thank you all for listening. For Scott Dochterman, this is Chad Liestikow, sending everything we got to folks in Perry, Iowa right now. And Take care. We will talk to you next Thursday here on Legends and Listeners from the Channel Seed Studios. Talk to you soon.